Okay, because I'm gonna have my own project that pretty much time me up, so I will try to do this third session basically right after the second one, and well, basically you have time, find time if you're interested, watch it, and if you think that makes sense, that's great. If it doesn't, you probably want to skip the rest, whatever is coming up in this pipeline. So anyway, following the last one, which talked, kind of in preparation for this one, it talked about the evolution, the development, and the revolution. So so what is the development strategy? I don't know if you ever heard of this word for studio artists anywhere else, but it's something that personally I benefited from it. So I like to share with everyone. I hope it does make sense. So let's start from the very basics. Somewhere between emerging artists and emerged artists, obviously, there's a long distance to cover, right? So not everybody eventually gets there. Some do, unfortunately, some don't. So the development strategy is really about who you are, what you are, and we talk about the relevance. So you look at who you are, and you don't want to change that because arts, they don't lie, or in most cases, unless you're extremely smart, sometimes sneaky, you can't lie, through your arts. So you are who you are. You can't really do anything about it. So if who you are and what you are determined that the relevant group of your target patrons or audience or whatever you call it, if that does not look very promising and you can't lie, so what are you going to do? Right? You can obviously continue to create art for yourself. You follow your own heart. Unfortunately, if that's the worst case scenario turn out, as a reality for you, I mean, not so many people out there that share your value. And so, right or wrong, and there's no right or wrong. It's basically just you are who you are, and unfortunately, you're in a very tiny group of a small group, crowd. For me, my literature creations, basically, it's very, very small, crowd. If there's a market I can define, it's a very unfortunate truth, but nevertheless, it's truth, right? So again, this is why I think we need, as a studio artist, development strategy. One, we don't lie through our art. On that premise, what can we do, if anything, right? So again, I go back to the basics, which is basically we start from your color palette management. Again, that's another word I probably just invented. I don't know if your academy teach you the same way. So we look at, let's say, Van Gogh, right? Van Gogh pretty much had three very strong personal styled color themes there. So his color blending, pretty much the signature style. But he was way ahead of his own contemporary, and nobody recognized that. His talent, his uniqueness, because he was not, following the mainstream. So he was way out of place in his own times. If he tried any development strategy, would that work? Nobody knows. And today, from that time to today, it's even tougher. Why? Today we're in the post-industrial times, which by definition is called pluralism, meaning there are all different kinds of subcultures out there. So, like I mentioned earlier, you may not find yourself in the sweet spot for any of this. So what would you do for development strategy? Again, this is just strictly, we're talking about canvas, whatever, painting. We're not talking about sculpture. We're not talking about the montage. We're not talking about whatever other artistic medium format, but painting. So again, you eventually need to have, as long as we're talking about paintings, you need to have your own unique artistic style, kind of like your signature style. And how do you get there from, of course, you started the economy from the basics. You build the foundation. So that's what I was talking about, the color palette management, right? First, the classical oil painting training, basically, it's not the big training part of it. And many classical institutions, they probably started with something very similar Michelangelo started. But the thing is, today, you don't really want to subject yourself to that kind of criteria, because if you do, it requires such a very, very solid foundation and takes a lifetime to get there. So if your works start to show in the same genre or category, people will judge you with the same standard they judge Michelangelo, right? So do you really want to be that classical to deliver all that kind of, details? And if you do, you got to have a really great sketch foundation, so you know how to build this grayscale transitions. And if you are not that strong in that, your color blending skill, no matter how good it is still going to show you in certain weakness, the spots that somehow, just spoil your painting, your artwork. So as a general strategy today, 21st century, you probably do not want to present your artwork at the same, genre as Michelangelo or Da Vinci or whoever else, right, from that times. You are someone, an artist in the 21st century. So something different, conveniently, whether you planned it that way or not. So people cannot, subject your artworks to the same standard when they go to, say, all those big art museum with the collections of the works from those, great masters of those old times. So that is the first step of forming your own strategy. Be yourself, okay, while you do still do a lot of practices in sketches and do lots of very good practices in color blendings. But again, we're talking about the color palette management. After you have done your part for the classical training, you need to derive from that base, arrive at the next level on the way to become yourself, and which is basically self-exploratory, self-discovery, both internally from your heart that you follow, and externally, basically, what is the artistic style technically that you come to form. Now that maybe at the beginning we all came from that period of time. At the beginning, personally, I was more influenced by the French Impressionists because I love it. I didn't even know I was actually copying it. And for a while, you can see that, influence in your works of that period of time. Over the time, you start to change. Maybe not so much French, Impressionists, but it's somehow more of the German-speaking area, the Expressionists, because that started to make more sense philosophically. And then eventually, of course, I walked away altogether and moved to the Chinese ink brush painting. But nevertheless, what it is, you started by the heavy influence of certain artistic style, and that would basically have an impact on you, and you still evolve, right? That part, it's evolution, is not the development strategy, but the development strategy works with it. So basically what it is, you maximize whatever you have got as your resources, or at least advantages, competitively versus all the others out there. Obviously, if you can replicate, let's say, Monet, right? That only makes you a Monet copier. So the challenge today is everybody try to be different, and it is so difficult to be, different authentically. It's basically one way or another, people are just knowingly or not knowingly copying each other. So now that comes to the part, development strategy. How do I want to be, get to be, and try to be myself artistically? Now that is development strategy at the center. So between where you started, the classical training, color palette management, as the foundation, you hope to arrive, or you try to arrive at the level, the next 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, or ultimately, I don't know how many number of levels you can find yourself escalated to, right? So each step of the way, you do review and adjust your development strategy. With that, hopefully, you don't really feel so frustrated all the time. Because I don't know if that makes sense to you, but personally, my practice is, or has been, between every oil painting, I always set a specific technical challenge. What is the target or targeted challenge in this painting technically I want to solve? So at the end of a year, I look back at all the paintings I completed over the year. I can see myself in progress. Now think about that. Year after year, I know all you guys are very young still compared to my age, of course. But if you keep this practice, you can see yourself in progress, and very evident, progress. Now, talking about a strategy in the traditional Chinese old school strategy, a lot of people would have like 3 aims: the high end, the low end, and somewhere in the middle. High end is basically you want to aim high, but it's still pragmatically possible that you should be able to achieve. That's the high end goal. And then the low end goal is, after all this time and effort, what's the minimum you could accept as the lowest, right? So of course, somewhere in the middle, that's easy. You don't even have to set. But why do we want to do the high-end aim in strategy? I would have that, for quarterly, annually, because this is how you can know for sure that you are making progress, because you achieve your goal, you are achieving, right? So then you don't feel frustrated, because lots of times, student artists, you feel you don't see the recognition out there, and you look at your own thing. For instance, like my calligraphy works on the wall. Why do I keep changing them? Because that's the toughest thing. You look at the thing on the wall that you did yourself. Can you always feel satisfied? Most of the time, I don't. So then I replace it. Right, this one, I definitely want to replace it. This one is good for now. That one, I think, is my best. I'm not going to change it for a while, but this one, yes. So same thing. So if you have the technical challenge set in every painting, in between the paintings, you see the progress, each one individually. And that is part of the strategy development, right? So again, we don't try to lie. actually we shouldn't lie. So everybody's different. For me, when I started at painting, oil painting that is, or watercolor, and anyway, just the Western medium. For me, I didn't know what I was gonna do. I just followed my heart, just pour out, right? But then, in the middle of it, or more towards the end of it, before I complete, obviously, I personally think you always have to bring everything into an order, to establish order, right? And you have a theme, and you offer some kind of a context, make it meaningful and hopefully very deep too. Now, that's the part you do want to have more intelligence into it. But before, at the beginning, there's no analyzing, there's no planning, there's no calculating. You just follow your art. But at the end, at least personally, I do, basically try to decide, what am I trying to say? What's the message I'm, conveying as an artistic communication? Right. So that's per painting purpose. But then over and over between the paintings, you don't want to be very repetitive because that's boring. And then from the other side, if people try to decide to collect your artwork, it's like, oh, I buy one, I buy you all, because basically you're all the same, right? So what's the variation? And you can be bored by keep repeating yourself. Why don't you just print it out? So anyway, all this is just part of the development strategy. If you like it, I can go on and talk more. Otherwise, I'll just wrap up here. Until then, ciao.